Welcome to Talking with Tatchell. Four of the world's leading reggae stars have signed a statement condemning all prejudice and all violence, including homophobia and violence against the lesbian and gay community. Their agreement has followed a 3-year Stop Murder Music campaign, which targeted their concerts, their sponsorship deals and advertisers, arguing that those who incite and glorify violence against lesbian and gay people and others should not be rewarded with financial success. As a result of this campaign, we've seen a huge support around the world from black people in many different countries who are fed up with the way in which reggae and dancehall music has been distorted into a very violent, aggressive, homophobic and sexist genre. With me to discuss this deal and the wider issue of homophobic violence in Jamaica and the Caribbean, which is often extolled and glorified by these singers, at least in the past, are Dennis Carney, the Vice Chair of the Black Gay Men's Advisory Group, and Brett Locke of the lesbian and gay human rights group OutRage, both organisers in the Stop Murder Music campaign. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Peter.
I'd like to start with you, Dennis. I mean, what's your view about this deal? Are these singers sincere? Is this deal going to work? Is this an important milestone?
I mean, I think this is a significant milestone in the history of the campaign. I mean, I never imagined that we would get to this place where, after 3 years of hard negotiating with the reggae music industry, that we would get to a place where we would have an agreement that is workable and is positive on both sides. I think this is an historic moment. I think it's an historic moment in terms of the idea of challenging homophobia, both here and Jamaica and the rest of the world. I think this is an historic moment and one that we should all be proud of.
What do you say to those who say, well, okay, the singers only did this because they're being hit in the pockets financially?
Well, I mean, I think there are two sides to this argument for me. I mean, my agenda in terms of this campaign is to put a stop to this music. I believe that this music fuels hatred towards lesbian and gay men. I think if there was music that advocated the killing and murder of, let's say, black people or white people, there would be outrage. Yet there seems to me to be some double standards around the fact that it's okay to write lyrics that suggest that those people, particular people, should be killed. It's outrageous.
I mean, like Buju Banton's Boom Bye Bye song, released a long time ago, but still performed and still available on compilation albums, openly advocates shooting gay men in the head, pouring acid over their bodies, and then burning them alive. And some of the other artists like Beenie Man, Elephant Man, Vibes Cartel, TOK, and so on, they also have songs which openly encourage, glorify, and advocate the killing of gays and lesbians. Yeah. So, you know, it is pretty extreme stuff. What do you say, Brett, to people who say, well, this may be so, but it's their right to free speech?
Well, I think people misunderstand the idea of free speech. I mean, free speech doesn't mean freedom to just say whatever the hell you want to. The concept of free speech is to facilitate and ensure in a society the free exchange of ideas. Now, if you have one party advocating violence and intimidating the other, that doesn't facilitate free speech. On the contrary, it actually shuts free speech down. And it undermines the very idea of free speech if one party to any conversation, any social dialogue, is too afraid to express themselves and to put their point across. And this is exactly what these singers are doing in Jamaica. They're helping to create such a climate of fear and intimidation that lesbian and gay Jamaicans are afraid to contribute their voices to the social discussion around their rights, around homophobia and the like.
I totally agree with you, but I mean, I was in Jamaica 2 years ago, and you know, as the vice chair of the largest black gay men's organisation in Europe, you know, I was afraid to come out to anybody who I did not know. If they weren't friends, if they weren't family, I did not come out to them. And the reason why I didn't come out to them is because I was in fear of my life. You know, if the information about my sexuality came out publicly in certain parts of Jamaica, I felt threatened. I remember having lunch in Montego Bay, talking to a friend who actually works for JFLAG.
Explain what JFLAG is.
Oh, JFLAG is the Jamaican Federation of All Sexuals, Lesbians and Gay Men, based in Jamaica.
So it's a gay human rights group.
Yeah, gay human rights group. And he was telling me about an attack on a gay man, not even a gay man, a man who was suspected of being gay. And I think the reason why they suspected him is that they believed that he looked at another man inappropriately. And they kicked him to death, right there in Montego Bay. And the police,
on the beach?
Yeah, and the police witnessed it. In fact, joined in. And the idea that, in this country, for example, I've grown up with the idea that the police are there to protect me. I might not have always felt that as a black man living in this country. However, in Jamaica, the idea that if you're lesbian and gay, there is no legal redress. If you are physically attacked, if you are abused, as there is in this country.
So you're sort of saying that in this context where homophobic violence is a reality, this music helps reinforce and legitimates those people in the society who feel that homophobic violence is okay.
Absolutely. There's no question in my mind that there is a link. 20 years earlier, I went to Jamaica. The whole time I was there, I did not feel threatened, or I did not feel as if my life was at risk. 20 years later, after 15 years of dancehall music, that was not the case. I believe as a direct result of that form of music. Even the Prime Minister in his last political campaign used, I think it was a Vibes Cartel track, Bum Bum Chichi Man, as part of their campaign slogan.
What does that mean, Bum Bum Chichi Man?
Well, it means burn them, burn gay men. And the idea that, and you cannot tell me that that does not have an impact on the attitudes and ideas that exist around lesbians and gay men in Jamaica when that music is constantly being put out there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose it's a bit like advertising, repeating messages is the rationale of advertising. It seeps into the consciousness. And I suppose it's the same with this music. It must have some impact.
Mm. Well, I would think that it's not just impacting people who then go out and beat lesbian and gay people or murder them. It's also a hugely detrimental to the mental health and self-image of lesbian and gay Jamaicans. Imagine if you're a gay man or lesbian and you have to hear this music coming from the flat next door, from the pavement down below,
or even your parents,
or even even in your
or
parents'
you turn
house.
on the radio,
or
you go to a club,
and you're constantly exposed to this threat. It's unimaginable.
Tell us how the Stop Murder Music campaign began.
Well,
it was on the initiative of JFLAG, the Jamaican gay rights group. They wanted international support because they are too afraid, because if they appear in public, they'll be murdered.
I think so. Well, I mean, in a sense, it was resurrected because the initial start, which we wouldn't say it was the Stop Murder Music campaign, but a precursor to the Stop Murder Music campaign, obviously came in the early 90s. After Shabba Ranks and Buju Banton's original release of Boom Bye Bye, and there was a lot of activity around that point. But
led by black gay men, black lesbians and gay men against media homophobia.
Yes, Ted Brown's group, and they made huge strides. And then I think shortly before Brian Williamson was murdered.
Explain who Brian Williamson is.
Brian Williamson was one of the founding leaders of JFLAG, and he was a hugely popular man in Jamaica amongst the lesbian and gay community. And I think more than anything else, his murder galvanized people to action. Yeah. It wasn't the spark that did it, because the campaign started shortly before then. But it certainly, I think, galvanized people to action. People really realized they could put a well-known face to it, and the fact that he was the leader of a fledgling LGBT rights group, I think, made it all the more horrific.
He was the only openly gay person in the whole of Jamaica.
Absolutely. He was the
only openly gay person ever in the history of Jamaica.
That I know about.
And he was killed. He was murdered.
And he was
in a horrific
Yes.
Multiply stabbed 70 times, a horrific butchery by 3 or 4 assailants.
Absolutely. And
Which the Jamaican police put down to a robbery gone wrong.
Yes, and
robbers don't stab their victims 70 times.
Absolutely, and from what we know, the investigation was so perfunctory that his friends arrived the next day to sort out his affairs, and finding murder weapons, lying behind the couch,
which hadn't even been taken away by the police for forensic investigation.
So it was absolutely appalling, and I think that certainly galvanized action internationally in support of JFLAG, who, to their credit, regrouped very quickly. And with the support of groups like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, ILGA, and campaign
Explain
groups.
what ILGA is.
ILGA is the International Gay and Lesbian Association, which is an umbrella group of lesbian and gay, bisexual and transgender campaigning groups all around the world. So I think with those 3 international organizations, and then with the participation of local groups like BG Mag and OutRage.
Explain what BG Mag is again. Sorry.
I think Dennis already did. It's the Black Gay Men's Advisory Group.
And it's based here in Britain, but a lot of its members are, like yourself, of Jamaican descent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so basically, the Stop Murder Music campaign came into existence at the request and initiative of black, lesbian and gays in Jamaica who wanted international solidarity, who felt that they needed support to fight this campaign because they were in a very vulnerable position.
And it's one of the main reasons that motivated BG Mag to get involved in the Stop Murder Music campaign. We wanted to act in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Jamaica.
What kind of stories did JFLAG tell you? I can remember getting a story from someone in JFLAG where they said that they'd been going home one evening and people had been pouring out of a reggae dancehall concert, and they were beaten up just because they were suspected of being gay. And at this concert, some of these murder music stars had been performing, and they got the whole crowd of 60,000 people to chant, "Kill the queers, kill the queers," or using the Jamaican patois, "Burn the Batty Man, burn the Chichi Man." So they said that they felt that the crowd had been incited and G'd up, and that some of the people leaving the concert had just looked for anybody to attack, and they suspected this person of being gay and gave him a jolly good beating. He said he was lucky to survive, lucky not to be killed.
And it comes as no surprise to hear that when I read a report by Human Rights Watch which suggests that Jamaica is the most homophobic country in the world. And it comes as no surprise that a report would be written by a human rights organization.
Even more homophobic than the Taliban,
Absolutely.
Afghanistan under the Taliban.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are countless stories, and I think one of the kind of damaging effects of homophobia is that often those stories don't get heard, those attacks don't get reported to the police, and so it's very difficult to get hard, concrete evidence about the actual direct impact of homophobia. But we do know about the death of Brian Williamson, we do know about the murder of Steve Harvey, and we do know about the countless attacks against lesbians and gay men. When I was in Jamaica, I visited JFLAG, and they had a wall full, about the size of this wall here, full of photographs of victims of homophobic attacks, machete wounds, gunshot wounds,
acid attacks,
yeah.
people being chased into the sea so they drowned.
Yeah, and they had photographic evidence to support all of those attacks. It was horrific.
And the Jamaican government's doing nothing serious to stop this, is it?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I mean, Brett, in terms of your knowledge and experience, I mean, we aren't talking about isolated attacks, we are talking about systemic.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even the Amnesty International reports on Jamaica acknowledge that the police themselves, do nothing to.
Indeed, the police themselves are sometimes the perpetrators.
Absolutely, that's exactly what Amnesty's report says. That often the police collude directly with the abuse and the attacks on gay people.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that I think, in some ways, as a direct result of this campaign, I think there are some moods that are changing in Jamaica. So for example, I'm aware that there was a very public homophobic attack made, and the police actually shielded the victims from the mob that had crowded round these, I think it was 3 gay men, while they were out shopping one afternoon. And I imagine if the campaign hadn't received the publicity that it had, and the fact that I think now there's a huge deal of sensitivity to these issues in Jamaica, I don't think we would have seen the police acting the way that they did.
So this is just for everybody who doesn't know this. These were 3 gay men out shopping. They were suspected of being gay.
Yeah.
A huge mob of up to 2,000 people surrounded them. They chased them into a pharmacy, and they were holed up in there, and the crowd was demanding they come out to be lynched, basically. And in that instance, you're right, the police did intervene to protect them and escort them away. But the police had to batten and tear gas the crowd to stop these men being lynched. And this is a supposed parliamentary democracy, a member of the Commonwealth with whom we have diplomatic relations. Extraordinary.
Yes. I mean, I understand from speaking to one of the men who was involved in that the police weren't entirely polite, shall we say, to the gay men that they escorted away. But at least they escorted them away.
They abused them as queers or whatever, but they at least put them to a place of safety.
They protected them. And I think that's a direct result of the spotlight, the world spotlight being on Jamaica. I think the authorities are now realizing they can't get away with what they might have got away with a few years ago when there was no awareness.
Absolutely.
Because the campaign, amongst other things, I mean, obviously it's to try and put a stop to the music, but more than that, it is to highlight the issue and to get a discussion going in Jamaica and elsewhere about the issue and to increase the visibility.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if nothing else, what the campaign has done is it's generated the largest single debate about sexuality, homosexuality in Jamaica, the Caribbean, and around the African diaspora. You know, people are talking about this. And I think, you know, we live in a country where lesbians and gay men have the right to civil partnership, they have the right to freedom from discrimination in the workplace, they have the right of freedom and discrimination in terms of goods and services. And, when, you know, growing up in a culture like that, as I have done, you know, to see in other parts of the world where lesbians and gay men are not afforded those rights, where often they have to flee their countries of origin in order to survive. I think it's really important that not only do we support our lesbian and gay brothers, but we also make links with other groups, because I think this music isn't just about hating lesbians and gay men. I mean, I think it's not incredibly loving and generous towards women. I think there are, you know, it's not positive about anybody they consider to be different. And I think the promotion of hatred in any genre, in any form, is something that we should not tolerate, whether it's here or elsewhere in the world.
And whether it's, you know, Jamaican reggae stars or Eminem or Guns N' Roses or Marky Mark or any of the other singers, white as well as black, who've indulged in homophobia and misogyny. These are all negative emotions and ideas which fuel and reinforce prejudice. Can you also tell me that I understand that as a result of this campaign, quite a few of the mainstream Jamaican human rights groups are now taking up the issue of lesbian and gay human rights, like Families Against State Terrorism, Jamaicans for Justice, the Independent Council on Human Rights. That strikes me as a very positive development, that the gay community has reached out through this campaign to the mainstream groups in Jamaica who acknowledge that gay rights are human rights.
And I mean, I think it's true to say as well that until everybody is free, nobody is free, in my view. And I think those grassroots organisations in Jamaica also acknowledge that fact too, and are standing up in solidarity with their lesbian and gay brothers and sisters in terms of challenging discrimination and oppression in all its forms. You know, it's not acceptable that any group is targeted in the way that this music targets lesbians and gay men specifically.
And in a way, I suppose, Brett, this is quite good, because this Reggae Compassionate Act, as well as renouncing homophobia and condemning homophobic violence, it also makes general statements supporting, you know, all vulnerable marginalised groups. It's against racism, against sexism. It's calling for, you know, a reiteration of the reggae roots tradition of one love, peace, harmony and social justice.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to make those connections. Because certainly lesbian and gay people in recent times have been the most visible victims, and consequently the most vocal victims of this music. But it goes far beyond that. You know, it also is incredibly misogynistic. It glorifies gun violence, which is having a devastating effect on the community, not only in Jamaica, but amongst Jamaican communities abroad. And I think more and more people are realizing that this music is just such a negative social force.
Sure.
But that's not to say that it's the music at fault, because I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dancehall and reggae acts. I mean, it's generally, I'm not entirely sure why reggae gets included, because reggae is not really at fault as such. It's just the dancehall subgenre of reggae and even there, it's just a handful of artists. I mean,
so that's a very important point. You know, this campaign has never been against reggae music, never against dancehall, never against Jamaica per se. It's targeting homophobes within the music industry and within the society.
Absolutely. It's as I said, it's just those 8 artists. I mean, it would be as
4 of which have now signed this deal.
4 of which, yes. I mean, for example, there's this kind of national front band called Screwdriver that have got viciously racist, anti-Semitic type of lyrics. Putting a stop to them was not anti-rock, you know. You know, they're a strange sort of you know, kind of Nazi folk bands.
And no one accused the people who campaigned against Screwdriver of violating free speech.
No, absolutely not.
It's just this campaign that's been attacked. And you're also, of course, been accused of racism, imperialism, colonialism.
Yes.
I mean, how do you respond to that, Dennis?
Well, I think what I hold in my mind's eye at all times when I think about this campaign, I think about the cry from J-Flag. They called for our help and support in challenging these artists and challenging this form of music. I agree with you, Brett. I mean, I don't hate reggae music, far from it, you know. My parents are Jamaican. I actually love the origins of reggae music. If it wasn't for reggae music, we wouldn't have a lot of the music genres we have today.
And indeed, most of the reggae and dancehall artists today are not putting out this hate music, this murder music. Their music is fantastic.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, and it's interesting because when you look at some of those dancehall artists who have never put out a homophobic track, their careers have skyrocketed.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
Sean Paul, for example, you know, I mean, I know there's some debate about some of his tracks, but basically he's never gone down the murder music route. And recently he's come out and said that this music is doing great damage to the reggae and the music industry in general, and also, of course, to Jamaica per se. And people like Beverly Knight, you know, singers like Beverly Knight have come out, you know, against it, saying it's against, you know, the kind of Jamaica she wants to see.
And I think I have to say, I have to commend Beverly for making those public statements, because I think I may have mentioned it earlier. I think what homophobia really does, that is not often acknowledged, it silences, yes, lesbians and gay men, but it also silences those progressive voices within the wider black community around homophobia, because I think often they'll be fearful of retribution for standing up and supporting a group that's seen as a group that's been as vilified in this music as lesbians and gay men.
I've got to say that in the course of this campaign, writing articles, I interviewed quite a few prominent black public figures who privately told me they thought this music was the language and music of the cesspit, but wouldn't dare say it in public because they feared the backlash from within sections, not all, but within some sections of the black community here in Jamaica.
Or the fear of being accused of being gay themselves, I think is a... And certainly in Jamaica, if you read a lot of the dancehall discussion sites and blogs and things, it's usually the first kind of epithet that's thrown at a rival singer. I mean, for example, Bounty Killers fans will call Beenie Man Betweenie Man.
Implying he's bisexual.
Elephant Man, because of his makeup and wigs and things, you know, often gets accused by the fans of rival artists of being a batty man. So it's
well, there is, of course, the scientific evidence that those who shout the loudest against homophobia often are themselves secret repressed homosexuals who are using homophobia as a way to deflect suspicion from themselves.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of scientific and medical evidence to that effect. So We don't go down that road just now, but I think some of these artists ought to be tread a bit more carefully. Otherwise, some people are going to be whispering about them. But I just want to come back to this whole thing about the racism neocolonialist thing, which has been thrown at this campaign. I mean, it's interesting the way in which Jamaica's anti-gay laws, which still exist today and which punish consenting adult same-sex behaviour with 14 years imprisonment, or up to 14 years imprisonment, or was it 10? 10, my apologies, was of course a law originally introduced by the British colonial administration. And prior to that time, Jamaica had no laws against homosexuality. And indeed, there's some evidence that amongst some of the indigenous peoples, homosexuality was to some degree, if not accepted, sort of tolerated, and certainly there was no violence and hatred like there is today. So in a sense, the real colonialists are the ones who impose those laws and who now defend those laws. You know, it's the people in Jamaica who defend the anti-gay laws imposed by the British who are the ones with the real colonialist mentality.
Well, absolutely. It's a lot of those laws date back to the kind of moral panic in the empire in the 1860s, and they were put on the statute books of British colonies, and there they remain to a large degree.
Despite Jamaica's independence.
Despite Jamaica's independence. I mean, very few countries have thrown them out. South Africa, notably, has thrown those laws out long ago, but they remain on a lot of former British colony statute books.
So obviously the campaign against murder music is just one aspect of a broader campaign led by Jamaicans but supported by groups like Stop Murder Music to try and challenge not just the music but the laws, the attitudes, the culture. I mean, what's your hope for the future, Dennis?
I mean, my hope for the future is that, one, we see an end to this music. I really want to see a day when, you know, no young lesbian or gay person has to be subjected to this music on a regular basis. That's what I would like to see.
And this agreement is the beginning of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think for the future, I mean, I would like to see these laws changed in Jamaica. I mean, you know, those laws have been on the statute book for decades, and I think it's about time they were reviewed and looked at. Because I think the reality is that people are actually losing their lives as a result of it being known what their sexuality is, and that's wrong. It has to change, and that has to be backed up by law.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you both very much. It's been good to hear you, and congratulations on the campaign. And we look forward to a day when not just 4 artists, but all 8 artists sign this agreement to put homophobia behind them and to move back to the liberation aspects of reggae and dancehall music, which is all about the upliftment and empowerment of the black community. And you don't do that when you encourage black men to hate and use violence against black women, or when you get black straight people being encouraged to harm black gay people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unity together has got to be the way forward for the empowerment of the black nation worldwide. Thank you, and thank you to all of you, and please join me for another edition of Talking with Tatchell.